Hello, I'm Troy Abels from Hanford, California, and you are listening to Gospel Tangents.
It's the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. What type of polygamy evidence exists from the Kirtland period? Of course, Joseph Smith admitted to girl business with the Fanny Alger incident around 1836. We're going to talk about Oliver Cowdery's excommunication trial, where he called it the dirty, nasty, filthy scrape. And that was in 1838. What other types of evidence exist from the Kirtland period? Check out our conversation. Well, welcome back to Gospel Tangents. We went so long last time that I asked Mark to come back and just tie up a few loose ends that we wanted to talk about. We've talked mainly about kind of the Nauvoo period, and I'd like to start out talking a little bit about some of the Kirtland-era rumors about polygamy. And so what I thought we could do is start with the 1831 revelation. Mark, could you kind of give people a little background on what that is and give us some details on it?
Right. So a lot of my research that I've done, or a lot of the writing, I should say, my research has included this, but my writing has focused on Nauvoo, because that's when we really have the most sources on polygamy. That's when we know for sure that it really was coming about. But we also know that it probably didn't start there, but we're not really sure when. And a lot of the evidence that we have, or the sources we have on earlier polygamy, come from later sources that are told in the context of this is a precursor to the Nauvoo polygamy. And so, but yeah, so we want to talk the 1831 revelation. 1831 is the absolute earliest that we have any sources that indicate Joseph was thinking about polygamy. And so this is a lot of times the 1831 revelation is called the Lamanite revelation. And there's pretty much two sources on this. And so one is a contemporary source, 1831, from Ezra Booth, who is one of the first anti-Mormons, one of the first people to leave the church, and then dedicate himself to trying to disprove the church. And he says that at one point. He says that there was a thing where Joseph told some of the elders that were going on a mission in 1831 to the Native American people to take wives of the Lamanites and such. And so William W. Phelps, years and years later, during the Utah period, produced a document he didn't claim to be an original from that period, but a reproduction, a copy of a revelation that Joseph gave him in 1831, where it says to take wives of the native people, and the implication being that since some of the men were married, that the Lamanite women they would be taking as wives would be plural wives. Yeah, so that's pretty much the sources on that.
So it's a pretty late source with Phelps as far as producing this.
Phelps is, and I believe Phelps was evidently reproduced it from memory. I don't know that he claimed to have like a copy or something of that document, that he copied the paper we have off of it. I don't know. I don't know too much about it, but it definitely comes from the Utah period. Now, there is some support in the Ezra Booth account, but I mean, even there, I mean, that doesn't mean that it was supposed to be all the men that were supposed to take wives. I'd have to look at it. I know Martin Harris was one that was married, and he may have been the only one. And he, of course, was estranged from his wife by that point. So I don't know. I think it's one of those maybe. I mean, it's one of those things that, for my purpose of trying to show that, yes, polygamy is a real thing that Joseph Smith did. I mean, that's not something I would hang my hat on at all. But, once we've established from evidence from Nauvoo that polygamy is something that Joseph Smith did, then something like this seems a bit more plausible. Seems a bit more possible that it might be. And so
I was just going to say, Dr. Larry Foster from Georgia Tech, he's non-LDS, and he's been one that really kind of goes along with this 1831 revelation.
I haven't I haven't looked into it too deeply. That's been my understanding that that's it. I'm open to the idea, but I think it's mostly late sources and the contemporary source. The contemporary source, I think the idea of Joseph expressing to these missionaries to take wives of Native American women. I think there's a good possibility that that's true, but I don't know that necessarily he meant to take for married men to take additional wives when that may or may not be the case. I don't know.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's move on to kind of the Fanny Alger scrape, affair, whatever you want to call it, and then how Oliver Cowdery testified of that. As let's see, I think the affair or the scrape or whatever you want to call it, I guess there's been the difference of opinion Don Bradley's found.
Yeah, Don Bradley has done some great work on that. I'm not quite sure about the dating on that. I don't know. I would go with what Don says. He seems to know he would know what he was talking about there. Well, I mean, it could have been any. It happened long before the Oliver Cowdery allegations arose. We know that much.
Right. There's a dispute on the dating of the affair. 1834 is, I think, the earliest, but I don't think most people go that earlier. But as late as 1836, I know some scholars believe it was after the dedication of the Kirtland Temple, which at that point the vision of Elijah would have restored the sealing powers. I know some people think it's that late. I know Brian Hales is kind of in between, probably 1835, 1836.
My understanding is, if I remember this correctly from Brian Hales, what he says is that the sealing power didn't necessarily need to be there for there to be a plural marriage. I mean, we typically think of plural marriage and sealing as happening, one meaning the other, and they don't necessarily. I mean, it might have been a proto, I don't know.
Well, and I'll even throw one other theory out there. Mark Staker, in my first interview with him, he said that when Peter, James, and John came in 1830, that bestowed all the rights needed, even the sealing power.
Yeah, I mean that depends on your understanding of priesthood. I mean, the Melchizedek priesthood has all of the authority to do all that. You just need the authorization to use it. They give the keys of the apostleship, which by necessity carries that. I mean, Peter's given, we point to that chapter in Matthew about Peter being given the power to seal on earth, and he's one of the ones there giving so I don't know. It really depends on how you look at it. It's a theological question more than it is a historical question about that. So, on Fanny Alger, it's pretty much the mainstream consensus that something happened between Fanny Alger. People are divided about whether it was just an extramarital affair that later on people picked up and just included in polygamy, or if it was an early plural marriage. It's kind of hard to say. The contemporary records of it are just that letter book from Oliver Cowdery, the letter that's recorded in his letter book, where he describes it as the filthy, nasty affair. And Don Bradley did that research. He said it was in the letter book. At least it was first written scrape, and it was crossed out and then replaced with affair, which in the terminology of the day was not as offensive as a word. It just means a thing. And
I know they also referred it to as the girl business.
And so then the other thing is the High Council minutes for Oliver Cowdery's excommunication. These are both dated 1838. And so, and this is a pretty good example about how if you're just looking at some of these incidents, not all of them, but some of these incidents in isolation, how you can see it could go either way. Because Oliver Cowdery, he's absentee for this trial. Joseph is presiding. There's like 8 charges against him. There's a lot of them, just all of them except for the one unrelated to Fanny Alger, and related to much of the other incidents that were happening and conflicts that were happening within the leadership of the church at the time. And so one of them the charges was that Oliver Cowdery had slandered Joseph with these allegations of adultery, And a couple of gentlemen, I believe it's Thomas Marsh and David W. Patton, apostles, bore testimony that they saw a confrontation between Joseph and Oliver Cowdery, and that Oliver had told them that Joseph had admitted to committing adultery, and then Joseph had confronted Oliver about that. And he says it's a pretty unique way. Richard Bushman makes a point of this. Joseph says, "Did I admit to committing adultery?" And Oliver said, "Well, no, you didn't admit to committing adultery." And then so then the minutes go on to say that Joseph told the High Council that he had confided in Oliver Cowdery something about the because Oliver Cowdery was a close friend of his and a confidant of his, so he confided in Oliver Cowdery this what happened with this girl business. And then the minutes don't go on to explain what that means. And so, but it does say that the High Council did sustain the charge of Oliver Cowdery unjustly slandering Joseph Smith with adultery. And then, of course, there's Oliver Cowdery's letter where it says it was a nasty, filthy affair. And that's all the contemporary sources. We have later sources. Anna Eliza Webb, who wasn't born yet, but whose family she's a relative of Fanny Alger, and Fanny Alger lived with her parents for a bit. She tells stuff that's very late, and it's completely secondhand. There's William McClellan's letter.
What does she say?
Oh, she says it was a marriage. She says it was a marriage. Eliza R. Snow in the Andrew Jensen notes classifies it as a marriage. Says it was a marriage. William McClellan, I can't remember if he says that there was a marriage or not, but he does say that he's the one that says Emma witnessed the exchange in the barn, and a lot of people interpret that to mean as an act of, them being caught in the act of intimacy right there in the barn, and Emma walking in on them. The exchange is what he says. And so that's where it is. And so that's what I said. And Levi, of course, the other one is Levi Mosiah, or really Mosiah Hancock, who recounts the deal in his and when he's finishing his father's autobiography, saying that his father officiated in the ceremony between Joseph and Fanny. And so there's that. According to Benjamin F. Johnson, her brother had asked her, what exactly happened between you and the prophet? And her response is, that's a matter of my own concern, I think it was, or a matter for myself.
Yeah, mind your own business, basically.
Right, which confirms that there was something. It's one of those things that you can look at it. If you look at it from the contemporary evidence, you can tell that something definitely happened more than what we're really told the whole story of. Open to interpretation. If you want to include some of this later evidence as reliable, and I personally do, then you could say it's at least a
probably one of the earliest legitimate references to polygamy.
I mean, if you're saying it might be something where Joseph tried something out, or if you're going with the, if you're looking at it from the point of a believer, looking at it as polygamy being a commandment of the Lord, this is Joseph saying, here, look, this is a commandment, I need to do it. Okay, I did it. I checked that box. I did it. And so, I think that's it. So, but it's one of those things that you kind of have to look at later evidence if you really want to flesh it out. So
interesting. I hope you enjoyed a conversation with attorney Mark Tensmeyer. A lot of polygamy skeptics love to point out that there were no children of polygamous marriages in Nauvoo. Is that true?
When William Clayton, when his wife conceives and becomes pregnant, and he approaches Joseph, the way William talks to Joseph about it, and the way Joseph responds is they think it's a mistake. They don't think it's like a transgression, like he did something wrong by it, like in a moral sense, but something that is maybe not the smartest thing to do.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe to patreon.com/gospeltangents for just $5 a month. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/gospeltangents. If you'd like to watch the entire video, you can subscribe at YouTube, Patreon, or on my website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button for just $8 a month. PDF transcripts are just $10 a month, and you can get those on patreon.com/gospeltangents or on my website. I'll send those to you as soon as I've finished completing it. If you'd like to get a paperback and PDF, just subscribe for $20 a month at either Patreon or on my website. Individual paperbacks are available at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can find all of our past interviews there. Show your Gospel Tangents pride by purchasing a t-shirt on our website at gospeltangents.com/shop. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. You can get our latest updates by friending me at Facebook, or you can also follow our page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Become an insider and you can see the newest videos. Follow us on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some of our great videos. Thanks again.